When talking about Satellite, you're talking about one of the first key episodes that a lot of people have watched. There are mainly three of them: Teddy Godzilla, Cool Dilemma, and this one. Usually, when you talk to a Code Lyoko newbie, you'll usually get one of those three episodes in terms of popping their cherry on this bizarre series. Mainly because they're one of the most frequently rerun during Cartoon Network's run of the show, and they happen to be some of the most early memorable stuff of the early stuff. A lot of people don't get to the back end of season one, mainly because it takes a monster of the week approach, and the plot doesn't really start changing per se until episode 23. After that, it starts taking a more serialized nature. It starts showing pieces of it, only to, in season 2, of course, go fully serialized. This is part of the reason why season 2 is more memorable than any other season of the show. It's the dramatic shift that takes place. So when talking about a season 1 episode like Satellite being a lot of people's first, this is primarily why. It's the first episode that really shows that the stakes are stupid high. Not the one with the not the one with the possible nuclear explosion or the train derailment. This one is. But it's also the best showcase of the entire team dynamic of this group. It's the best example of it in the early going. Now, keep in mind that my reviews are from my own perspective and my own views of an episode. But if you want a deeper dive than one that I can give you a podcast without danger certainly can provide that at Coleoka Pod on Twitter, of course, as I will constantly be referring to them throughout the course of this entire series of episodes. We're already down 10, or now 11, thanks to this. So we got another 83 episodes to go. And in terms of Satellite itself, they actually brought on an actual satellite engineer to break down the science, or lack thereof, done in this episode. And yes, a lot of it is sci-fi exaggeration BS, but in a fun way. The basic plot of this episode centers around the eponymous satellite, but it starts endlessly enough. This is the first time that we've seen XANA have multi-layered plots. Usually, in most episodes before this point, he would have one target, one enemy, one thing, and execute it, only to have it fail. This is the first time that a XANA plot has become multi-layered. It's actually three-step. And it starts right from the top. Regular day in class is interrupted by everybody's cell phones ringing collectively all at once around the entire school. This, of course, as it were, a nice piggyback off the last episode being about phones being confiscated as well. Now we've gone to the school level. And all the teachers naturally do what they must. It's school policy after all. But unlike most Lyoko episodes at this point, the gang automatically knows that there's a XANA problem. But no argument, no doubt, they know instantly and start making moves to fix it, which shows character growth and time growth. But Elizabeth ain't having it. Definitely ain't having it. She wants her phone back, and she's willing to do anything to get it back, even if it means railing against her own father and the entire administration. So, she decides to go the length of labor unions. No, I'm not kidding. She goes full blown labor union. First, signing a petition of the other students of the misdeed, which of course John, Luke, and the teachers completely ignore. So naturally, they take the next step and decide to go full on strike, including a sit in. Let me tell you, this part of the episode might be understated, but it's amazing how accurate Sissy's strike actually is, down to the exact steps she takes in order of escalation. And surprisingly, she's got a rather surprising ally in Yumi. Of course, this is just a diversion to keep an eye on the school. School seeing that the attack may escalate. The teachers decide, rather stupidly so I might add, as the podcast gang points out in a rather comical and hilarious fashion, a 10-minute conversation on how ridiculous this is. They decide to disconnect the school's antenna, thinking that if they do, they can't use their phones. Guys, ever heard of roaming charges? That idea would have worked as much as well since the strike is working. Jeremy wants to check signal strengths and where the signals are going, so he's headed up to the roof. Unfortunately, John Luke instructs Jim to be the one to disconnect the antenna, which, oddly enough, juxtaposed with when the guys are up on the roof. XANA decides to say in his own words, "Oh, hell no," and decides to give Jim a shock, a big one. He nearly falls off the building if not for the guys. Odd is brutal in this episode. His one-liners are cold as all heck. When the guys send Jim to the nurse's office, and the nurse asks what happened, of course, Odd lets off a line of, "He's a regular live wire." And this is shortly after saying, "Smells like roast chicken." Sometimes Odd Delarobia as the right/wrong line at the right time. This episode is a fine example of it. It turns out taking over the phones was only step one. Plans to take over the city's main TV dish and then move on to a military grade satellite. And this is where the sci-fi BS comes in, armed with a laser. Now, of course, Jeremy has to commit some cybercrime and crack into the French government's CIA files to figure out what the heck is going on with this satellite. Meanwhile, the strike continues to escalate past the sit-in and goes straight on to picketing. Now, of course, they still haven't figured out what XANA wants to do, but Sissy's pretty sure she knows what she wants. Her phone back. Oddly enough, it's Oregon Odd on the dive this time. Back to the ice sector we go for the second episode in a row. It's only then that Jeremy figures out what he wants to do. He wants to use the satellite's laser to blow something up. The guys, rightfully, make the assumption that he wouldn't fire at himself, meaning the factory per se. But Yumi's still at the school, which gives him target one. But without their phones, Yumi doesn't know this. Thankfully, on the old factory run, Kiwi manages to follow them there. Jeremy decides to send Kiwi back with a note warning her of the impending laser shot. Unfortunately, John Luke spots Kiwi. Trouble on top of trouble as Pick on Yumi Week continues in perpetuity. But, sure enough, Santa gets what he wants, because the supercomputer always gets what it wants. And wants to perform a long distance headshot on Yumi. Now, of course, in Lyoko, things go as well tensioned as you would expect. Then his plan keeps escalating straight to the final part as the rest of the gang scramble. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Xana actually gets a chance to fire the laser. Leaves about a 10-meter crater in the middle of that new track that was built in Cool Dilemma. Now, of course, by this point, thanks to Yumi's encouragement, the strike has been encouraged to go outside of the school grounds and into town to liberate all students of phone freedom. Naturally, once the laser shot goes off in John Luke's direction, who tries to stop them at the gate, he finally realizes the kids might actually be in danger, which is his first and only smart move in this episode. And it just so happens that the tower is found just in time, and the gang is really pushed here. Odds taken out at the ankles, while Ward gets knocked out. Rough stuff here. But the job gets done just in the nick of time before Yumi is given the long distance headshot treatment. This episode, just like last episode, is tension filled. At this point, they've really mastered making you nervous for these kids. Something that they will perfect over years. But these last two episodes are fine examples of them learning rather successfully how to build a simple story and make the tension go nuts before it's over. Satellite is a superb episode, and just like I said last week, I gave you the grade early, and that grade still sticks at a 5 out of 6. Adults being dumb is the biggest flaw here. Just all kinds of dumb. And of course, if it wasn't a sci-fi show, none of this plot actually go down. But if you're willing to suspend your disbelief and believe that a satellite from orbit can headshot a child in a believable fashion, then this one is totally a blast. Pun somewhat intended, but the next episode, though, there are words to be said. There are words that I've been wanting to say about this particular episode for nearly 2 decades. Well, I'm not saying it's gonna be a rant. I don't do rants anymore. But if I was in the mood to do one, this episode would certainly get me there. So, join me next week as I try to maintain my calm demeanor and sanity as I discuss The Girl of the Dreams, episode 10, the worst episode of this series, period, full stop, without fail. Friendship is magic even at a 1 out of 6 back in its day. And that one was the cart before the ponies. This is Code Lyokav's 1. The worst episode of the series. And I'm going to spend nearly 15 minutes talking, quote unquote, about it without losing my mind. So if you want to bear witness to a man's literal insanity, you can click the subscribe button that will show up at the end card here. or at any time, really. Make sure to hit a like. We do a Lyoko episode a week here on the Aelita Diaries, and we'll get all 94 of them done. So until next week, where I have to fight even to get through watching the darn thing again, I'm Nirvana Sparkle, and I'm going to need to find peace. But you should too. I'll see you next week.